Yo, yo, yo. I'm back. I told you guys I'd be back. 12 subscribers. I know you waited for me. You did, didn't you? You did? Alright, this video is gonna be different from the rest. I'm saying that like I've made 37 videos. This is literally my second video. But this video is not scripted because I wanted to give my raw thoughts on this. I felt like that would be way better. So you have to be prepared for a little bit of yapping, but trust me, it's worth it, okay? I'm gonna try and keep it as structured as I can. Now, about a little over a week before this video was recorded, the first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man released. And I already know that there's gonna be a few people confused because, you know, Ultimate Spider-Man, I'm not referring to this one. Okay, I don't have the new one, but I'll put a picture of it up on the screen. There's a new one. If you haven't heard anything about this, honestly, I would be a bit surprised because it's been generating a lot of buzz on social media. It's been kind of the talk of the town, you know, if you're into comics at all. There are a few reasons I would want to highlight on the external situation which, you know, created this comic and how it became so big, as well as the story reasons on why it works a lot. Now I'm gonna kind of separate that and I'll let you, the viewer, know when I start talking about the story stuff because obviously spoilers, even though there's one issue out, there's a lot of things to unpack. Though it's only been out for a week, as I said earlier, this comic has generated a lot of hype, even before its release. The anticipation behind it was crazy. This was already very huge, even outside of comic circles. It made it into the mainstream. So the new Ultimate Spider-Man did have big shoes to fill. And I think it genuinely did, at least in terms of critical acclaim. The sales, we haven't really gotten any sales yet. You know, those numbers are gonna come in later. But I've seen a bunch of people getting these comics and buying them. And if you compare that with the current mainline Spider-Man comics, which is 616, they haven't really been making that much money. So I think it would already be a fair estimation to say that this new Ultimate Spider-Man comic book is gonna be making way more than the main line, because nobody fucking reads that, honestly. Let's just be honest. So I think there are a number of factors that make this comic book great, or at least warrant the hype that it was getting even before it released. The first one is the team creating it, which is Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto. Now, Marco Checchetto is an amazing artist. He did Daredevil's run by Chip Darsky, which was phenomenal. It got a bunch of acclaim and the art just looks phenomenal. It just looks amazing. You know, I'll just put it up on the screen. Just check out his art. He's just so good. But an even bigger name than Checchetto is Jonathan Hickman, the writer. This man is a legend in comic books, especially for Marvel. I think it would be a fair estimation to call him, I guess, the front man of Marvel writers right now. And ever since he joined Marvel in 2007, he's just been, you know, relaunching everything. He's been putting the work in, reinventing a bunch of characters, writing all these amazing runs. His saga, his Marvel saga, if you haven't heard of it, it's just probably the most acclaimed piece of Marvel comics, the most acclaimed saga of Marvel comics in the last 20 years. You know, he wrote a Fantastic Four run, which got critically acclaimed. It's kind of the definitive Fantastic Four run of, what's the right word? The new generation, even though it's like a decade old. But after Fantastic Four, he went on to the Avengers and the New Avengers, and even those runs get so much acclaim. And then he ended it out with a big banger of an event, which is probably the biggest event in Marvel's history, Secret Wars. Jonathan Hickman, the guy writing Ultimate Spider-Man, was the guy who wrote Secret Wars. He wrote all of this. And then after that, more recently, he did a run on X-Men, and even that got critically acclaimed. So a lot of people are like, yeah, I want someone like him on Spider-Man. But Hickman himself said that the only way he's gonna be on Spider-Man is if he can do something with the character, if he can put a new twist on the character, because Hickman is, as I said, a reinventor. He likes reinventing all these characters that are like 50, 60 years old. And naturally, he wasn't inclined to write Amazing Spider-Man, which I think I should touch upon because it highlights, Ultimate Spider-Man highlights a bigger issue in Marvel, because Marvel has this cycle going on that has been going on ever since this dropped 20 years ago, 24 years ago. It's gonna be 24 soon. And the issue is that Marvel won't change anything in Amazing Spider-Man. They are notorious for being super strict. Editorial controls everything. There is barely any creative control. And a bunch of writers have spoken up against this. Like Chip Darsky, who wrote Daredevil with Gicchetto that I brought up earlier, who's an amazing writer. He had a run on Spectacular Spider-Man. Everyone loved it. They called it the best 616 Spider-Man run in the past decade. But he got the offer to write Amazing Spider-Man and he declined. Why? Because fan outrage and creative control. The fans are always crying about everything. They're always bitching about everything. It makes sense because Spider-Man comics are bad. I'm a Spider-Man comic fan and I'm always bitching about everything. It makes sense. But also the creative control, which Marvel does not give to Spider-Man writers, which is why Spider-Man has been getting hate in the comics. And that's why his comics are really, really bad right now. If you've seen anything on the internet, if you've seen any of the hate, you're gonna understand it. I mean, I'm gonna go on a mini rant for a second, because how bad does it have to be? Like, how out of character do you have to make these people? Like, you're getting Spider-Man beat up by Tombstone begging for his life. He's like, oh, I've learned my lesson. And then you have Mary Jane literally cucking him for Paul. Who is Paul? Like, who is this guy? There is someone in editorial sitting there who is self-inserting himself as Paul. That is the only explanation that I could have for this. But the main issue here is that Spider-Man in the mainline universe, in 616, is in a bad shape. He's in a bad position. And Marvel, of course, are losing money. And something like this happened in the 90s. If you aren't familiar with Spider-Man lore, the 90s was arguably one of the worst decades for Spider-Man, because a majority of the decade just involved one arc. And that arc is called the Clone Saga. Now, if you don't know about the Clone Saga, it was this super convoluted arc that went on for years, and it kind of damaged Spider-Man's reputation, that his comics were at a bit of an all-time low at that point. His sales weren't working, he wasn't able to get back up, there wasn't really anything to do with him for that time because of how convoluted the story got. And this is the highlight for all of these situations. Marvel was losing money. They were broke. They almost got saved. They just got saved from bankruptcy by the Blade movie, which just saved Marvel. They're at the brink of collapse. That's when they had to take a huge leap and a financial risk by creating an alternate universe, the Ultimate Universe, which they used to bring in new readers from the 2000s. So all that baggage from the past could be removed and they could write a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and it worked. It was a hit because Spider-Man comics were so bad at that time that people just stopped reading the main line and went into Ultimate. Sounds a bit like history repeats itself, doesn't it? Marvel has this issue where they just cannot adapt. They just won't adapt. There are two things that determine a comic book's success. One is more important than the other, by the way. The first thing is critical acclaim, and the second thing is sales. Now, sales is way more important than critical acclaim in the comic book industry. Critical acclaim is still there, you know, there's always gonna be those cult classics or whatever, but sales are what matter more. We obviously know Marvel doesn't care about the critical acclaim because the current run has just been the most hated in its history. No one likes that run. I haven't seen like a single person like praising it. But yeah, Marvel was losing money, so then they decided to take this leap. And they chose Jonathan Hickman to do it, which was a phenomenal move. But as I said earlier, this doesn't really fix the problem, if you know what I mean. This only kind of helps it on the side. It doesn't really fix the inherent issue, which is just Marvel refusing to adapt. But at the end of the day, people don't care. They just want Peter Parker happy with a family, right? They just want their character to be in character again. They just want their cast to be there, and they want a good story coming from the characters they grew up with. And I understand that. Obviously, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan myself, so I totally get it. And I think Hickman did a phenomenal job with the first issue. As he said in that one interview, he wanted to reinvent the character, do something with him that was never done before. And I'm glad to say he did it, and he did it in an amazing way. Now I'm going to be talking about the narrative of Ultimate Spider-Man and why people like it and why I love it as a Spider-Man fan. But there's going to be spoilers here, so please, you know, read it and come back. Now, the first major change is obviously that Peter Parker in Ultimate Spider-Man, the new one, isn't a teenager when he gets bit by the spider. He's an adult. He has his whole family. He has children. And this has never happened in a Spider-Man comic before. This is completely new, a completely new concept. Peter is just at a completely different stage in his life when he gets this power. A 15-year-old getting a superpower and a 35-year-old getting a superpower are gonna have way different reactions, and their behavior is gonna be so much more different. The first Ultimate Spider-Man really highlighted the teenager part, because in the original run by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, he was only a teenager for like 30 issues. Whereas in Ultimate Spider-Man, Peter was a teenager throughout the entire story. And this comic is genuinely the reason why a lot of people think Peter Parker is a teenage superhero, even though he isn't. Now, the first change that Hickman made was this, but the second one is even bigger. And this one was a reveal I was not expecting in the slightest. And that is, Uncle Ben is alive. Aunt May dies instead of Uncle Ben. Now there's only one issue out, so this could change. You know, Uncle Ben, he might, we don't know yet. I hope he doesn't die, because this is such a cool change. In every iteration of Spider-Man, Uncle Ben dies, but now it's reversed. Now it's Aunt May dying instead of Uncle Ben. So this is such a fresh concept, and a lot of people were bringing praise to this as well. What I mean to say is the friendship of J. Jonah Jameson and Uncle Ben. Like, that is such a random pairing, but Hickman managed to make it work in such an amazing way. Like, those guys literally just stole the show, man. Like, they just bring so much energy and charm, which is such a cool thing to see. Like, that is probably the thing I'm looking most forward to in this story. I want to highlight the theme of this story as well. We all know what the main theme of Spider-Man is. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. In the original story, Peter Parker gets the power, but it takes his uncle's death for him to learn the responsibility. But in this story, he already has the responsibility. He mentions to MJ and Ben that he feels that something is missing inside of him. He feels like he was robbed of a future. He already has that responsibility. He just doesn't have the power. This complete inverse is what I love about Hickman so much as a writer. He is so good at, you know, reinventing these characters. I said this word like the 76th time, but like that's what Hickman is just so good at. Anyhow, that first issue was incredible, honestly. As soon as I saw Hickman's name, even before this released, as soon as I saw his name and Marco Cicchetto's name, I already knew that we were in for something special. Spider-Man, these two guys writing Spider-Man, it's a complete dream team. And so far, with this first issue, they completely knocked my expectations out of the water. For future predictions, something bad is gonna happen. You know, if you've read Jonathan Hickman stuff, something bad is gonna happen. There's gonna be some family drama. I don't know about a divorce. If there's gonna be something like a divorce, I already know the Spider-Man fans are gonna be really, really mad. They're gonna be really pissed because they're like going through it again. You know what I mean? It's like having your parents divorced, right?
And then you go and live with your mom, and then your mom gets married again, and then you love your stepdad, right? But then she divorces him again.
Right, it's like that. Is that a good analogy? Should I cut this out of the video? So yeah, though Ultimate Spider-Man it's not really a good sign for 616. And people are saying, you know, buy Ultimate Spider-Man so the sales go up, and Marvel editorial realizes that, oh, you know, maybe we were wrong the entire time, you know. Maybe Peter Parker shouldn't be such a cuck in our main universe. They're not gonna do that. Marvel does not care. They do not give a shit, right? Like, they only care about the sales. And they're just gonna be like, okay, you know what? Here, take a bone. You know, I'll give you a little bit. I'll give you a little bit in this alternate universe so you can be a little happy, you know, so the angry fans can calm down. 616 is just having their whole other can of worms that, you know, needs to be opened up. I do think I'm gonna be making a video on that at some point. I wanna make a video on the entire history of Spider-Man at some point, which is gonna be, I don't know, 3 hours long or something. But yeah, this is kind of my take on Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm still really, really looking forward to this series because I know if it works and if Hickman, you know, goes full power on this like he always has, like he's been with Fantastic Four, with X-Men, with Avengers, with his whole saga, I think we have a generational run on our hands, just like the 2000s Ultimate Spider-Man. This could be a decade-defining run. I genuinely believe that, and this is just this beginning. I'm just so excited because this is the first time I get to see something like this from the start. And you guys do too, so check it out. Check out the comic if you can. Also, a quick shout out to one of my buddies, Kevin Chroma Magics. He also made a video on Ultimate Spider-Man. His was way more narrative focused compared to mine, which I was just yapping a lot about the industry. His is way more focused, and his is a great video, so please check that out. I'll link it in the description. All right, what else do I have to talk about? Is that it? All right, I think that's it for the video. You know what, Spidey, you do the outro.